Anyone who believes in indefinite growth on a physically finite planet is either mad or an economist.
We don't want to focus politics on a notion that involves the rejection of principles around which a large majority of our fellow citizens organize their lives.
We are not as endlessly manipulable and as predictable as you would think.
In my early days as chairing the Arts Council, I've been going around the country. I've been visiting many cities and other communities where the local authority and the Arts Council and local business and higher education institutions were working really hard to put together valuable partnerships to deliver arts and culture to the benefit of everyone. But there was something missing for me. And as it went on, and as my visits went on, and as our thinking went on, I reflected that we started to make a public investment in arts and culture seriously in the Second World War under SEMA. Then it was crystallised in 1946 when the Arts Council was funded under Maynard Keynes. And since 1946, I'd argue that politically there's been unanimity that we should make a public investment in arts and culture. Some parties may have put it up or down from time to time, but broadly nobody has ever disagreed with that proposition. But we've been doing it for so long, and the unanimity has gone on for so long, we've forgotten why we're doing it. And it seemed to me that we couldn't articulate clearly the whole picture of why we make a public investment in the arts, the whole picture of what the public benefits are. And as a result, we couldn't develop the policies for the 21st century that we need, social, political policies, that are going to drive that benefit further.
We feel we've got really the next 18 months to make all the elements of the case for funding the arts. We say the next 18 months because after the next election, when the new government comes in, there will be very quickly some spending discussions. And the last spending discussions we had with the Treasury were based on the arts, culture and the economy. And the Treasury were very polite about it. They said, you are making strong arguments. You're making arguments that are strong enough to get you to the table. Therefore, we are taking you seriously. But actually, what about the rest? They actually said, what about the rest? Because we know that we don't just fund the arts for its contribution to the economy. We fund it for a whole host of reasons. So Baz and I wanted to capture what that whole picture is, to articulate it in an easy way, but then get on with the hard bit of filling in the evidence and the arguments and the articulation to form that whole argument that we can use with politicians, that we can use to engage the public, and that we can use to really, well, stand up for ourselves and explain with confidence what we do. So at the heart of our argument has to be culture. Culture and what it does in itself. Because if we don't get the culture right, if you like, if we don't create the conditions for great culture, for great art to happen, then all the other things that we talk about don't happen. And we need to get better at articulating that. And various of us over the years have tried this. And in addition, we need to kind of unpick that cultural argument as well. It's not just the intrinsic value of culture. Culture is a good thing for you. It's about trying to get the notion of an empathetic citizen. It's about getting the notion of how you challenge ideas and explore ideas using culture. And use culture to change the world, frankly. We all know it can. But we need to capture those arguments.
The second of our headings, education. So the way in which our arts and culture feeds into our liberal education, our liberal arts education at every level, at primary and secondary, and of course the Arts Council is involved now with, for instance, the Department of Education, the way in which higher education is now taking responsibility and seeking to be a partner in every local community. They want higher education institutions, as they now define their role, they want their students to have a brilliant time, so they want great arts institutions in the area. They want to be involved in the local economy. They want it to be a place people want to come and study, people want to come and work. They want institutions there that their graduates can take their first step into professional careers. So higher education is now beginning to define itself as the core of every community and its arts and culture. And of course, there's continuing and lifelong learning.
The arguments around culture and society, we know that what culture does for society, I mean, it can embrace simple well-being, the need to entertain and engage, there's a whole issue, a whole societal issue about equality of access to culture and what other forces in society mean in terms of people's ability to get the benefits that culture can bring. There are all kinds of arguments around health, all kinds of arguments about how culture can connect with people for whom society seems to be offering very little, and perhaps overcome that poverty of aspiration and be the missing link for things to come together for individuals.
Economy. So, if you start by talking about arts and culture, by talking about the value to the economy, you are deservedly labelled as somebody who knows the price of everything and the value of nothing. And we say very strongly it's about the intrinsic value of culture first. But you cannot ignore the benefits of arts and the economy. There is the way in which talent feeds into the creative industries and creates genuine economic value in the future. And we quote often the fact that the people who ran the wonderful Olympic ceremony, Stephen Daldry and Danny Boyle, who've created some of the most cash-generative movies in this country in the last decade, started in regional theatre. But also, and this is in a sense a relatively new aspect to the agenda, it's cultural exports. People who've come into contact with British culture are more likely to trade with Britain. We know that our international standing in culture and art is second to none, actually. The economic value of the investment in arts and culture, regional regeneration, tourism, cultural exports, creative industries and employment is part of it. Now, fanfare of trumpets. There you are, world domination. Joking apart, there you see culture at the centre. Culture comes first. And there you see all the elements we've spoken about. Now, you could cut this a number of different ways. Whichever approach we take, we need to give the whole picture. And that's, as you see there, culture at the centre, the empathetic citizen, identity and collective memory, inspiring ideas and fresh insights, quality of life. Society, health, the way it feeds into health, social care, disadvantage, prisons, engagement, equality of access, well-being and entertainment. Education at the top, primary, secondary, higher, continuing and lifelong. And their economy, as I was saying, creative industries and employment, cultural exports, regional regeneration and tourism.
Of course, they all connect, and you can see connections between engagement, equality of access and education, and indeed higher education and the economy. I mean, there are connections you can make all around, which is why we want to consider it as a whole thing. Looking at the blobs, we know there's a lot of research going on each of those blobs. Am I allowed to use the word blob? I suppose it's a term of art now.
You already have.
Yeah, I have. The blobs all have a lot of work behind them that exists, and one of the things that we're going to be doing is bringing it all together, but also identifying where we need new arguments, where we need more research, and where we need to kind of just nail a few things down. So that by next year, we are ready for whatever the new government brings.
I was at a meeting the other day of what's called the Core Cities Group, and we had a good discussion about it, but one of the points that was made, slightly witheringly to me, I thought, as I was a naive Johnny-come-lately, which I am, it's true. The question is not whether we in this room know about this, the question is who else knows about it, and the question is who else understands it. My experience of the first 9 months being chair of the Arts Council is in government, amongst politicians and civil servants, arts and culture is very low down the agenda. These things are not understood. If they're not understood, we can't develop policies from it that will maximise the benefit of arts and culture in the future. And I think that's the task of the next 18 months, to get the message beyond here, refine it, and always to talk about the whole picture.
Part of the merit of this whole exercise, whatever happens from today, was to make sure that all of us, if we're the arts and culture sector here this morning collectively, we're having those broader conversations with experts outside to make our case. I just want to remind everyone that it had a very clear aim, which was to remake the public and private investment case for the arts. And a couple of other things to stress about that. Part of our ambition was not to do that in a protecting what we already have or defence against the cuts way, but about making a renewed investment pitch that will over time increase the stock of investment going into the arts. Our start point, therefore, was how to scale our ambitions and impact, not protecting what we have. How can we project greater benefit and impact, to be highly strategic as well as brilliantly tactical. And with that aim in mind, the summary chapter outlines a number of recommendations that flow from each of the 4 sessions that we had, which are about making the economic case, which are about city art strategies, which are about the grand partnership between the education sector and the cultural sector, and which are about making the wider case for the wider impact of the arts. Under making the economic case, in addition to talking about things around let's have a good GVA model that Arts Council might lead on that's light touch and meets Treasury requirements, and also let's review the composition of the Creative Industries Council because it's not working. You know that when the DCMS Select Committee has a recommendation mandating ministerial attendance that it's already become an irrelevance. But the recommendation I'll highlight is investing in our creative assets inquiry. This built on Martin Smith's brilliant paper. Business should lead on the commissioning of an asset-based study of the cultural industries, trying to bring city investors and the arts and cultural sectors more closely together. A mixed panel of city expertise, proven cultural entrepreneurs, key anchor institutions like the BBC and Channel 4, and other relevant experts would use an investment lens to analyse and amplify the commercial potential and capacity of the sector, and the terms of reference would be co-produced with Arts Council, BFI, BIS and DCMS. In terms of the grand partnership between schools and education, again we made a whole range of recommendations about curricula, on monitoring the level of cultural education provision in our schools over the next 3 years, and there's a role there for the Cultural Education Partnership Group, which you will be well aware of. The thing that I'd like to highlight, because I think it's more in tune with the bigger sweep of our discussions this morning, is that I'd highlight our recommendation that consortia of cultural organisations should come together and make more ambitious interventions in education provision. So, for example, if the cultural sector truly values the role of the arts in education, how could it better support the best directors of children and youth services across the country? With regard to arts and regeneration and city strategies, the key message from Alexandra Jones is that we actually need an end to cut and paste, unsophisticated boosterism policies which put arts and culture at their heart but really don't deliver. But the centrepiece recommendation I'd like to highlight is we've called for the creation of a Creating Resilient Places Commission. And so building on the lessons of Arts Council, England's current Creative People and Place initiative, Arts Council, DCMS, DCLG should commission a Creating Resilient Places study with strong representation from the culture sector and other key government departments, Department of Health, Health and Wellbeing Boards, Department of Education, which examines the key interventions required to build greater resilience in cities and places. All too often, the arts and cultural sector doesn't operate with this scale of ambition, and perhaps as a consequence, we're rarely sought out as a fully fledged strategic partner by government and other agencies as they consider these vital future challenges. Finally, with regard to the fourth seminar on capturing the wider impact of the arts, we call upon Arts Council to commission, working in partnership with DCMS, DFE, and the HRC, and other key trusts and foundations, some of whom are here this morning, at least one high burden of proof study which would explore the impact of particular arts interventions in a key impact area. It could be health and wellbeing, could be education, could be community cohesion, and this approach should be repeated at the start of every 3-year funding cycle. The key point there is an interesting issue around, actually, there's lots of arts and evaluation going across the cultural sector, but actually we know when we talk to government officials, they say that not enough of it is of a quality that's convincing them. So actually maybe we should be pooling resources to do a limited number of very high burden of proof studies and freeing up the sector to actually do more evaluation that's geared towards improvement and development, rather than always proving their case and the validity of what they do, but rather developing and experimenting what they do. But perhaps I think the greater value of the seminars is that they're brought into sharp relief some necessary challenges and priorities for those who support the arts, and obviously therefore the people in this room. I'm going to give you a quote from Jonathan Swift, the author of Gulliver's Travelled. "Vision is the art of seeing what is invisible to others." And for me, our discussions have made some important things more visible to us than they were before, and they offer a sort of vision for action and advocacy in the coming years. So what are some of the things that we've made more visible? I think the need for the arts and cultural sector to intervene with more ambition and clarity. There's a big standing challenge in all these papers that we need to focus on impact first and resources second. I've mentioned cultural education already. We need to ask how can we have the biggest impact on the education of our young people and then act accordingly. This may require the arts to make more systemic interventions on teacher training, for example, or things that you can all dream up and think about to maximise impact. And in turn, this may mean turning away from other cultural education activities that are less impactful. I've heard a lot about what we as a sector think about the government's education policies, but what's our implementable vision of what cultural education needs to look like, and how do we carve out a space to experiment at scale to challenge orthodoxies as fully fledged partners with the education sector? We can't sit outside of the system. We have to be part of it. What else is more visible? The urgent need to identify allies who we can forge deeper partnership with, from higher education to commissioners across the public service. My experience is that in our bigger cities, with established and well-resourced cultural leadership, this stuff gets done, but countrywide the picture is very patchy. This is about sharing opportunity and expertise and creating a sense of urgency. What else has become more visible? The need for a grander narrative and smarter cases across the whole holistic value chain, the subject of Alan and Peter's opening comments. I think the beginnings of that narrative are here in the forwards by the RSA and Arts Council, the ambition displayed in these papers and in our discussions during the seminars. Instead of arts for art's sake or box-ticking instrumentalism, the emphasis of our discussions has been on mainstreaming arts and culture into the broader national and local case for economic and social renewal, with a strong focus on increasing levels of collaboration and innovation. But big challenges remain. Let's give you a few. Which agencies, in a climate of austerity, are going to take on the budgetary responsibility of investing in high-quality, longitudinal, high-burden-of-proof studies exploring the wider impact of arts and culture? The harsh reality is that the arts and culture sector is relatively starved of analytical and evaluation support as compared to other parts of the third sector. But if we could tell a richer story about individual cultural experiences and the quality of all the work we do, would that be a short-term cost worth paying to grow the investment pot? We may have to speculate to accumulate, colleagues. We also need to be more demanding partners of government. Neither DCMS or BIS are serving us well in terms of the analytical and strategic support and development of the cultural sector. I would say in the absence of a discernible cultural policy pulse in Whitehall, our collective heart is going to have to beat a little faster. For example, we could review the total spend on impact evaluation across the arts and cultural sector and see whether we could pool that money on larger scale evaluations more effectively. What might a People's Manifesto for the Arts look like, written by audience members and communities across the UK, informed by new data on the quality of cultural experiences and aspirations? How can we use the conversations we've started here, and which will continue in different ways over the next 12 months, to galvanise action and energy? We have the beginnings of a plan, but also we could discuss what does the development coalition to make it happen need to look like. And let's not doubt the urgency. Back to the pragmatic starting point of these seminars, we're already on a countdown to the election, with manifestos being developed and taking firm shape by late 2014, early 2015. So I gave us 12 months, not 18. That just gives us just 12 months for the arts and cultural sector to get the story and its investment pitch to government and its other key partners right. So to close, I want to mention Grayson Perry. Grayson's not new to debates about value and advocacy in the arts. He's been saying interesting things on this long before his recent Reith lectures. He wrote a piece in The Guardian in 2010 where he was writing about the launch of the Cultural Capital campaign. Some of you will remember that very well, I'm sure. A sector response to the forthcoming cuts, stressing the economic value of the arts. He described the great and the good of the arts world on the panel that day, Nick Sirota, Jude Kelly, Nick Heitner and others, as glamorous lost leaders of UK Culture PLC. With everyone conscious that the arts weren't really winning the argument. So to close, I think UK Culture PLC needs to give a better account of itself in the next 18 months than we've given in the last 3 years since the Cultural Capital campaign. The good news is no collective PLC in the UK has a richer and more varied value story, a genuine triple bottom line of cultural, economic and social value. But providing that better account will require a willingness to change and collective self-belief that the case for arts and culture can move from the margins to the centre of national and local debate. It requires seriousness, rigour and ambition. Let's see what we can agree on in terms of making that happen and how.
As I think we all know, 50% of the income that come to arts organisations, cultural organisations in the national portfolio comes from the public, from ticket buyers, etc. We dwell quite often on how much money we rely on from the box office, if you run a venue like mine. But I think we probably spend less time thinking about the amount of the huge quantity of time that people invest in the arts, and critically, the investment of their imagination, which makes them potentially our strongest partners. Actually, we've got a lot to learn from the people that come and visit us and pay money to see us and support us and make work with us, because quite a lot of them are really good at talking about it already.
Funding really is at the heart of what we're talking about this morning. Certainly we as a city, and I don't think the regions generally, think that London should suddenly be starved of funding. You know, London is the jewel in the UK's crown, whether you like it or not. It's almost a separate economy. And our arts institutions are absolutely fabulous. I love going to the National Theatre and the Royal Opera House, and they should be funded, you know, to do what they do. But you've got to fund the regions as well. And the problem is that historically, if you go back 10 years, and you took the totality of what local government funds and the totality of what the Arts Council fund, the local government figure would be much bigger. But that's the figure that's shrinking. And my God, is it shrinking fast. You know, so we have to think of ways, be innovative. and I think that came out in John Knell's report, of different ways of funding, different ways of approaching different streams of funding. Because if we don't, the regions will die. It's not about now. I know now is difficult, but it's about the future.
Two or three things I'd like to pick up on, and if we're lucky, I might even be able to weave a narrative link through them, but I might not. The first was really around a strong sense of us needing either to connect the various arguments we're making, or at least to stop arguing about the arguments we're making, because we've got people saying artists make work because they want to, we've got people saying that art's for art's sake, we've got the intrinsic versus the extrinsic, and actually, I think those arguments can be connected into a holistic case, which is, I know, what Peter and Alan are trying to do. They write beautifully about the power of art to impact on us as individuals. They talk about how the arts illuminate our inner lives, how they enrich our own emotional world. What they don't specifically highlight is that in enriching our own worlds and increasing our own concepts and our own ability to experience emotions that we may not have ourselves, but we can understand through artistic experience, we actually increase our understanding of other people and their worlds. And in doing so, we breed something which I think could not be more important at any time than now, which is tolerance. So I think that it's the contribution to the individual which is the basis of the value of the contribution to the collective, or indeed to society. Because if you take the compassion that arts can engender, the tolerance they can engender, and you match that with the mirror neurons that the scientists discovered in our brain in the early 90s, which allow us to socialize, then you have the basis of a society in which we can live together with diverse opinions and views and differing faiths and beliefs, but we can live together collectively and subjugate some of our own individual ambitions or hopes or beliefs to the greater good of the whole.